You guys know the Battle of Kharkiv was no joke. Russian forces caught the Ukrainians flat-footed, or rather, the Ukrainians weren't able to do anything to stop the Russian preparations. But Ukrainian forces delivered again, stopping the Russians cold in Vovchansk, and United 24 was on the ground. So we can take a look at their reporting and talk about how this battle may have changed at least Putin's plans for the war. I'm Paul, U.S. Army combat veteran. Let's get into it. Now, first off, I'm going to add this caveat because I have to every time to the YouTube censors. Guys, I've censored all combat footage. There's nothing in here that warrants you demonetizing me. Okay? I'm doing the right thing, guys. So please work with me here.
War has returned to Kharkiv. Since Russia started its offensive on the region on May 10, the drive from Ukraine's second largest city to the front line is only around 20 minutes. For this report, we are embedding with the Kharkiv Brigade. On May 11th, one day after Russia sent thousands of troops over the border, they were deployed to Lipsy. Now, it's the last village before enemy lines.
Okay, so for context, guys, let's take a look here. The battle map overall looked like this. Let's zoom in here. Okay, so, and we're going to take it back to May 10th, right, about 1 month ago, so that we can see kind of what things were looking like in real time. So here we go, May 10th, right? And you could see that Russian forces, their initial push, or at least the initial reporting, was, there it is. There was a small incursion near Platonivka, where they were pushing towards Vovchansk, and then a second one near Plina. And you could see here, the village of Lipsy is right here. Now the terrain is kind of unique, because you see there's the larger city of Kharkiv, right? And then Russian forces advanced up to this river here, the Kharkiv River, and really this reservoir held in by a dam. And this is a really interesting water obstacle because what it does is form what in the military we sometimes call a handrail. And a handrail is a obstacle that ensures that as long as you can orient your navigation around it, and it sort of blocks you from getting too far off course. But in this instance, it stopped the Russians from advancing outward. It actually constrained their own ability to conduct a breakthrough. Now, I think the Russian objective overall was to link these two forces and ultimately push into until they were within artillery range of Kharkiv. Now, that didn't happen. You can see here, Russian forces, though, were able to make a bunch of advances and ultimately occupied these regions here. And the reason is because at the time, there was a prohibition on using Western weapons in Russian sovereign territory, which meant that the weapons Ukraine relies on to break up Russian assaults before they start weren't able to be used. So Russian forces were able to gather, prepare carefully their assault forces, establish depots and logistics, resupply, all right over the border, which meant when the offensive happened, Russia couldn't hit them really until they were well inside of Ukrainian territory. And when they did hit them, they were able to just zip over the border, treat their wounded, resupply, and then zip back right over. So it really played into Russian hands. And we'll talk a little bit more as the video plays on, but this was something where Putin was essentially daring the U.S. and the West to authorize their weapons, right? Again, imagine it's sort of like if someone's going to rob your house, they stand right outside of the curb on your driveway, slowly gathering more and more of their friends with baseball bats and pipes and chains, and you go, really? You think I'm not going to do something? You think that because you're 2 feet over on the curb that I'm going to be clueless? And so that's essentially the game Russia was playing.
So we drove without lights and finally entered a basement here close to the front line. This is a sort of small command post. And now we're waiting until the air is clear to move on to the position.
All right, shout out to this dude who's trying to sleep, and he's trying to be like, yo, please, shut the fuck up. But you understand that these guys have a job to do too. And part of that is telling the story about what is happening, about what's going on the front line, making sure that the West understands what their tax dollars are supporting. And in this case, it's Ukrainians defending their own territory from Russian aggression. And I also want to point out that these kind of small command posts or forward command posts, forward CPs, are a staple of any military. You absolutely have to be, the closer you are to the front line, the better command you're able to exert over the troops, right? You can also, generally, it commands a smaller element. So this is probably a company or platoon-sized command post.
The commander asks us to apply blue tape so that Ukrainian snipers don't mistake us for Russians trying to infiltrate the trenches. That's this kind of war.
They are flying all the time, observing the settlement and all our movements.
This is one of the reasons why, when we partnered with the Liu Brigade, who's also fighting in this region, they're actually fighting, I'll show you here, they are fighting in Vovchansk. So this brigade was deployed here. The Liu Brigade was deployed in Vovchansk, this center here. And they also requested, more than anything, they wanted drone jammers. Those are devices that can disrupt the signals the drones are receiving from their operators. And that's why they say, right, just the observation drones continually tracking and monitoring Ukrainian movements. That's kind of the fear, is that the Russians, by operating their drones, having freedom of the skies, so to speak, can observe Ukrainian movements and positions and basically eliminate any chance of a surprise.
It's time to go. We head to the car and drive through what's left of the village. Our goal, the zero line. The Ukrainians hold this side of the hill. On the other, separated by a small river, are the Russians.
Right. And again, when we asked the guys from Liu what was the most important battlefield skill, they said digging. I mean, you can imagine these trenches, I don't think by most reports, weren't here that long ago. And they were dug. Now, these look like really clean lines. They might have been dug by human beings. They could have also been dug by backhoes or specialty trench diggers. But you could see how incredibly important this is for any kind of military defense. And you can see here, you can literally watch as trench lines are established. So observe here, right? This is the area where they're fighting. Here's Lipsy. Probably Hyoboka is closer to their fighting. You can see the Russian forces advance, and you can literally watch in real time as they make one more advance, and then they kind of get stuck at Hyoboka, and they get locked into place. So again, here we are, June 7th, and the Russian forces really haven't made much of an advance. They never made it to Lipsy. And I think that is reflective of the fact that once you build good defense works, they are, in this conflict at least, very hard to break. So let's see. Apologies. I just there we go. Okay. I stand corrected. This may have been a pre-built position. And it's one of the things that was actually controversial, is that the Ukrainians said, they're like, listen, because our Western weapons can't be used in Russia, we have to build our defense works deeper inside the border. So that, again, you can imagine, right? If you're sitting on, let's say Ukrainian defenses were to sit right here, right in Plina, and the Russians were to attack. Well, the Russians literally, if the Russians sit on this side of the river, Ukrainians can't hit them back. They're in Russia. They can't use artillery. So the Ukrainian command said, listen, we're just going to build our defenses inside of the border. So that way we can use artillery, we can use HIMARS, we can use anything because we've got this standoff. Now, this is not a good look, though, and Russia feels, oh, we're winning. So I suspect, based on kind of how well developed this fighting position is, right? This is a real proper bunker. I think this was pre-constructed and is likely the actual first line of Ukrainian defenses, of prepared Ukrainian defenses.
Доброго дня.
Противник, он лісок. І вправо від ліска, то вже там противник повністю.
So here on the zero line, you can hear gun battles all the time. The positions, they are new, as you can see. You know, people build concrete blocks here and fortified, but it helps obviously. But soldiers don't feel that it's enough. So even though the situation is stabilized, it's still extremely dangerous. And
okay, well, interesting. They say it's new. Okay, so I guess there's my answer. Maybe Ukraine has some kind of contracted soldier, like rent a bunker. I've definitely heard of people getting things like shipping containers or prefab structures that literally they say, hey, dig a hole in the ground. We get an excavator, we dig a hole, we drop in the bunker when the hole's at the right distance, and then we pile some dirt back on, and you go, okay, bunker set, right? Bunker shows up on the back of a flatbed or something. Right? And that would be I guess maybe that's what they're doing. Or they have some kind of process to drop in, because this is really a very constructed bunker. I mean, look at these pre-cut logs. Like, this is no joke.
then in the end, it's volatile. Nobody knows what will happen. See, it's costing the guys a lot of energy and bravery to be here. So definitely you can see it in their faces.
The situation is difficult. The enemy fire is intense. They are trying to break through our lines, trying to find a weak spot on this territory.
Таку слабку часть цієї території. Зупиняємо його.
But we are managing to stop the enemy. They haven't broken through. There's only constant shelling and nothing else.
Тільки обстріли і більше.
Okay, this is interesting because this is May, and you see he's still got his hoodie up over his helmet. I wonder how cold it is here. I guess maybe early morning, spring in Ukraine, it's still probably kind of chilly.
Here, we move to the back part of the trench. It's the resting position. Our first interview is interrupted by glide bombs.
Які постійно на позиціях. Щас ближче підійди, бо можуть осколки. Закрой док.
But, in the typical Ukrainian way, even in the darkest of times, humor and strength prevail.
Хлопці, приєднуйтеся до нас. Приєднуйтеся. Не так то чорт страшен, як його описують.
Okay, that's pretty funny. That's also true of like any. One of the things we used to joke about when I was in Afghanistan is that, you know, you just hear kind of Afghan like security forces getting blown up all the time. You would hear kind of gunfire sporadically. And people used to joke, people that were on their second deployment were like, you know, it never bothers me when I'm in country. It's when I'm out of country and back home that I hear loud noises that it really like freaks me out. And I thought that was really interesting. And there's something about the ability to normalize things and the ability to sit there and go, okay, like if I'm going to get shelled with artillery, I want to be in a bunker, right? And again, I think instinctively your body and your mind start to internalize those ideas to say, hey, I want to be in a bunker. I want to have my armor on. I want my helmet. I want my weapon, right? And if you have those things, you feel more comfortable. And then you're in when you're in the civilian world, you go, I don't have body armor. I don't have a weapon. I don't have anything. And you feel naked. And then you hear that noise and you go, your like lizard brain is just like, you're in danger. It's really weird. It's really weird. And obviously, I think the Ukrainians are probably, the soldiers probably understand this.
And indeed, it is not all bad. Although the new offensive on the Kharkiv region has caused a lot of upheaval and forced Ukraine to spread its army and resources over a larger front line, brigades like Kharkiv, through fast deployment and reaction, have managed to contain further damage, for now.
This really looks like a prefab bunker. I don't know what else to tell you. It's got to be just a drop and go bunker. It's really well constructed, and it looks modular, right? And look at how big it is. Yeah, I think that's got to be like they have these, before this was in the front lines, they had to have just pre-constructed. Maybe that's what he means by new. It was new in like 2022, 2023. And they said, hey, we're going to dig out this position with a backhoe. We're going to drop in this bunker. We're going to shore it up. We're going to pre-dig some trenches. It's just so well made. And we've seen other entrenched positions, that just don't have this same look, right? Oftentimes the trenches are only waist high or only chest high. These are almost an entire person, right? Oftentimes you see guys who have to crouch down when they get into the bunkers.
At the moment, the situation has changed for the better. We have halted the offensive. The enemy isn't advancing like before.
Right. And the fact is that in the month since this was filmed, you can see that they're right. Here we go. I mean, take it. So let's assume this was filmed, I don't know, let's be generous and say May 15th. You could see that the Russian advance has completely stalled out, right? Here we are till today. They haven't advanced a millimeter. And I suspect that they're probably in one of these positions here, where they say, oh, the enemy's at the edge of the tree line. So there's basically along this front, there's a little bit here. Maybe the Russians are out in this tree line, but I suspect here's the place where they're just in front of the edge of the tree line. Basically nowhere else, according to this map. So this is probably where they are. That would make sense. There's Lipsy, and they drive into the position, and here's the Ukrainian positions, and that makes sense, right? These guys are probably maybe up here or maybe right here. But you can see once the Russians reached this advance, they can't. I want to point out a couple of deets here. Got some treats. I got a bottle of water, candy, Bim Booms. Looks like some canned meat, Winston cigarettes, a lighter.
When our brigade took up positions here, there were assaults. And now they are looking for weak spots in the flanks.
Шукати слабкі місця. Тобто тут вони вже не так йдуть на прорив.
But as we drive home, the air is nonetheless filled with uncertainty. What happens in the long run will depend on many factors. What Russia does, and also how the global community reacts. Ukraine will need much more resources to continue its fight for survival. One thing is for sure, though. Kharkiv will continue fighting.
If you want to see some of the footage from the fighting itself, the uncensored combat footage, that is on combatvetnews.com. You guys know that I try really hard not to get demonetized, but YouTube really doesn't care much for war content. Sponsors really don't want to touch me at this point. So I depend on you guys to help me out. So if you want, you can become a member of Combat Vet News. Twice a week, you'll get the analysis and breakdowns of the viral combat footage. It's oftentimes just a week old, oftentimes less than 48 hours old. We're going to introduce some new benefits too coming up here for the lieutenant and the colonel tiers. So again, if you want to support the channel, we really appreciate it. And of course, the shout outs. But thank you guys who've supported us. Thank you guys for tuning in. Be sure to like the video. Thanks to the Colonel tier members and the Lieutenant tier members of CombatVetNews.com. Could not do this without you guys. I'll see you in the next one. Cheers.